All right, 1, 2, 3, Cancun. The NBA finals are officially over. NBA offseason has started. I'm not wearing these sunglasses to celebrate. I'm wearing them to hide my
Shame.
my bubble or my big eyes from crying so much.
Your
You
puffy
know how
eyes.
my swollen, that's the word I was looking
Yeah,
for. My swollen eyes.
because you bailed on the Warriors, changed your pick, and now
I know.
you
And
have
it
to
happened. It happened
replace.
just like I said. It was Warriors in 6. That was what I
Yep.
originally said.
Now I get all the credit for predicting the right games.
This is what the worst part is I predicted the Nets to beat the Celtics, and I was wrong. And then I predicted the Bucks to beat the Celtics and was wrong. Then thought for sure the Heat were going to beat the Celtics and was wrong. So then I switched, and I knew immediately once I did, the Celtics would let me down. I'm never
Yep,
picking Boston to win anything ever again.
you should know by now. They
I should know
they
by
only lose. They've made it to the conference finals so many times. This time the finals still can't win. Never
now.
bet on the
Yeah,
Celtics.
yeah, I'm done. I've learned my lesson now, I think. Till next year's playoffs, we'll see.
Yep, when you pick them to win the whole thing.
Would
So
never.
we already established the Warriors won the whole thing, obviously.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, I mean,
If
unless you
you're
guys
our
have been living
if
under a rock,
if you're
then
our Oakdale cousins who watch the games like 2 days after they've happened,
yeah,
they always are late.
yeah. So what does this mean for Klay Thompson's legacy? We're going to go through all three: Klay, Draymond, and Steph, but let's start with Klay.
So for me, I think for Klay Thompson, this is one of the greatest comeback stories ever because to be in the finals in 2019 and then he shatters his knee. It was his ACL, and
Yeah,
then the next year he's set to come back and he tears his Achilles.
yep.
And it's like, is this guy ever going to come back? It was like what 700 and something days
Yeah, it was like
since his last
basically a
NBA
full two
game.
years.
Yeah, um, for him to come back, and he was definitely a shell of himself, especially like in the finals. Like he
Yeah,
was still good. He's not like washed or anything, but you
no,
can tell the old Klay Thompson we had is not there. His ability to create off the dribble, which I mean, he never really dribbles that much anyway, but he's
yeah.
definitely not as good as he was
Well, and his
before.
defense too.
Yeah, he's just lost a step. But I think it's one of the greatest comeback stories in sports to and it just shows how pivotal he was to that team
Yeah, true.
because
Because they weren't even in the playoffs without him.
yeah. Well, I mean, because the one year Steph was injured too. And so, like, I'm not going to count that. Like, their
Yeah,
whole team was
exactly.
injured in 2020. But 2021, Steph had one of the best years of his career stat
Yeah,
wise, led the league in points, and they still couldn't make the playoffs.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
and then really the only difference between that year and this year is Klay Thompson came back.
Yeah, and I mean Jordan Poole got way better,
Yeah, Jordan Poole began to blossom too, which was huge.
but yeah, I think it's like him and Paul George are like two of the greatest comeback stories in the NBA. Because I mean, Paul George suffered his terrible injury,
Yeah,
snapped his leg in half, and then came back, and now he's like a full-on all-star again, and just doing really well. And then Klay Thompson now, I'm like, that is like, I don't even think he is as good as he's going to be next year and the year after because I mean Paul George was not himself
that's
for at least a year, year and a half, and then finally got back to where he was Indiana Pacers Paul George.
yeah, and I think it's interesting you bring that up because I think there is definitely a mental hurdle you have to
Yeah,
overcome. I mean, even look
exactly.
at Gordon Hayward when
Yeah,
his foot went. I mean, he still has never been the same since then. But when he came back, he was just so tentative to do
yeah,
anything at first. Because I
to
think,
even jump.
yeah, I think there is a little bit of like PTSD, especially because he had two injuries.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, And it's not like Clay's game was like John Morant's, where it was strictly based on athleticisms.
Yeah. No,
Like I don't know that we'll ever get 100% Klay, like peak
yeah.
2016 Klay, but I think we can get close. Maybe like an 85% Klay we can
Yeah.
get back.
No,
So,
I think the biggest increase will be on defense because I think I mean, he basically averaged the same numbers in this finals than he has in any other, or in this playoffs than he has every other playoff run. It's
oh,
like
I didn't know that.
19.8. Yeah. So, I mean, there wasn't much dip in his offensive ability, but I definitely think because he used to be one of the best wing defenders in the NBA.
Yeah. Well, and he still got 1.3 steals a game and zero point 0.5 blocks, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
I think what takes away from his defense, because he was definitely the number 2 defensive guy,
Yeah.
I think. And then now Andrew Wiggins he's kind of taken him and Draymond Green. It's like they're the clear 2 best defenders on that team. And so maybe that's why we also think, oh, Clay's not as good as of a defender because,
Yeah.
he's,
It's true.
yeah.